Thank you, Khenpo Sodargye, for your wonderful speech. The following is the interactive Q&A session. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to ask.
Hello, Khenpo. First of all, I sincerely thank you for coming to our school today and giving a truly wonderful speech. I have a few questions for you. One reason is why we live in an era where science is so widespread. But whether it's young people or old people, when facing certain difficulties and disasters, people often turn to what is now commonly referred to as superstition, seeking a kind of spiritual comfort from it. I wonder, even though science is so widespread nowadays, and people are not lacking in scientific knowledge, they know it's superstition. Why do they still actively seek out these types of superstitions? How do you personally view this kind of superstition? Another thing is, I'd like to ask, regarding the murder case committed by cult members in Zhaoyuan, even in this era where science is especially widespread, why do people still believe in such cults? Why does this kind of thinking still spread? Thank you.
First, in this scientific age, in fact, science does not change according to human will. That is to say, it is a discipline that evaluates phenomena objectively. From this perspective, that is, in fact, essentially the definition of science. So in the age of science, indeed, actually not only the elderly in society, but also young people have some superstitious beliefs. Moreover, even among scientists, there are some who hold superstitious beliefs because they themselves actually don't really know what science truly is, in fact. Constantly and uncritically believing in science is also a form of confused faith. Therefore, I think that actually in any era, there will always be some people with correct and rational beliefs and some with various superstitions. And the root of this superstition, as explained in the teachings of Buddhism, is ignorance. Ignorance means lacking true wisdom, and people without wisdom. Generally speaking, in the world, including among scientific researchers, such people also exist. We can look at the history of some Western scientists, including figures like Nietzsche and Freud. They themselves admitted that in their early years, they too had been superstitious. But the superstition they referred to was not about religion. For a period of time, they were superstitious about their own outlook on life. So I think that confused faith also exists within religion. I often talk about religion, Buddhists or people of different faiths. For example, here in Shandong, Taoism has also been very prosperous throughout history. But whether it's Taoism or Confucianism, this is the hometown of Confucius and Mencius, which is also a sacred place for Confucianism. But in fact, Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism, these three schools, should be considered the traditional pillars of Chinese culture. As for the traditional genuine doctrines, I think as long as you take the time to understand them, they are not superstitious at all. However, later generations did not truly grasp their teachings, and in fact, things are not as described in those doctrines. Therefore, some folk practices are actually a form of superstition. So ultimately, a person's superstition is related to their overall level of wisdom and understanding, because their wisdom hasn't reached a certain level yet, when their overall qualities have not yet been developed. Many of their actions are actually the result of superstition. So even in the age of science, superstition will definitely still exist. This kind of superstition is not only found among ordinary people, but even among people in higher social strata, such as professionals or those with advanced education. That's the first point to note. Second, regarding the issue of cults, in fact, what is considered evil or righteous is often defined differently in different places. Some places, for example, consider certain groups to be cults, while in another environment, they may not necessarily be considered cults. I think that so-called cults are, in particular, those teachings that harm people's minds and bodies, including those that are harmful to other forms of life. These, in general, can be called cults. But if a teaching, when it comes to life or living, not only does no harm, but is actually beneficial to a person's progress, and is beneficial to all of humanity or to society as a whole, then such a teaching is not necessarily a cult. Therefore, although its definition can vary depending on context, moreover, everyone may have different perceptions. For example, when a person does not believe in a certain religion, his judgment was founded upon his own personal subjective biases. And it's quite possible that he determined it to be a cult. But it is not necessarily a cult. Therefore, he may need to observe it from two perspectives, because some of the definitions we've established also have elements that require further observation.
Hello, Khenpo. First of all, I would like to sincerely thank you for your speech today. I have a question for you. You spoke about each of us, especially young people, should have a correct and reasonable belief. This belief is explored and discussed in Buddhism. Each of us needs to have a concept of past and present lives. Besides this, does Buddhism have any other views on what kind of correct and reasonable belief individuals, especially college students, should have? Thank you.
It is most beneficial for many college students and people in the world to have right view and right faith in their lives. As for right faith, what we consider true right faith is, in fact, it is the clear understanding of cause and effect, that good deeds bring good results and bad deeds bring bad results. And also the understanding of past and present lives. Although many of you here may have grown up in varied backgrounds and environments when it comes to your own past and present lives, some of you may have some questions or doubts, or even not believe at all. They think that people are just like a stone or a piece of wood, who once they're gone, they're gone. But in actuality, that's not the case, because such an argument, as I recall, I once translated a treatise on this topic. It's called Stories of Reincarnation, or On Past and Present Lives. Now, it seems that when this book was published, it was titled The Truth of Life. I think so. It's sold in airports. I feel that in this book, it should have explained to us, first, from a scientific perspective, the reasoning behind the existence of past and future lives for every person, and also from the standpoint of Buddhist theory and logical reasoning, that is, analyzing it from a philosophical point of view. Therefore, it's very necessary indeed for everyone to use this approach to truly understand the reasoning behind the existence of past and future lives. If, in fact, past and future lives do not exist, then living every day just seeking pleasure and enjoyment, or doing all kinds of evil and muddling through life would also be acceptable. But once it truly exists, if we are not well prepared for the future and for our next life, it would be extremely ridiculous. In the world where I live, in Tibet, you could say Tibetan Buddhism is very prosperous and flourishing, and everyone is really especially afraid of retribution in the future. This includes, even in this very life, some people experience immediate retribution. Some retributions come in the next life, some in future lives. No matter which kind of retribution it is, everyone is very afraid of it. But now in many groups in big cities, for example, in different communities, as long as they've made it through this life, that's enough for them. Actually, this kind of viewpoint is very frightening. Why are there so many people in society today who commit all kinds of evil? The reason is that they lack this understanding of cause and effect. If people had this view of cause and effect, everyone would feel that I should still place some restraints on my own behavior now. Otherwise, when the consequences eventually come in the future, I will be truly pitiful. Therefore, I sincerely hope that some of the students who are present here today, because students' perspectives often come from their teachers, and some teachers are very clear and knowledgeable about traditional culture and religious teachings. For example, during the Tang Dynasty in China, it could be said that 90% of people believed in past, present, and future lives. That's the kind of place it was. But later, due to the course of history, many young people actually, in fact, your views may not be that solid. Some young people I've met, they say, I don't believe in any of that, in a particularly firm tone. But actually, when you say that, if you truly had such great wisdom, then maybe you could say so. But our wisdom is also limited. Sometimes we can't even be sure about something as basic as the college entrance exam. For someone like this to truly deny the views of Shakyamuni Buddha, I think it's extremely difficult. So at certain times, you could say, I'm sounding a warning bell. What I mean is, when you're young, you should take a look at your own views. If a person has a concept of cause and effect, then they have boundaries and self-restraint, which is very good. If you don't understand cause and effect, then when you grow up and have the ability, I'm afraid there may not really be any benefit for your family or society.
Respected Khenpo, hello. I am an ordinary student at Qingdao University, and I would like to ask you 2 questions. The first question is, I not long ago actually came across some news about some female students at certain universities who were raped. The schools would give them some compensation, such as guaranteed admission to graduate school. But I feel that when facing something like this personally, for her, it is an extremely major disaster. This disaster is almost impossible to erase and is no less severe than experiencing a natural catastrophe. We treat these incidents as just news, consume them, and then move on. But for her personally, she might still feel that the looks from others are as sharp and piercing as knives. For her, even after a long time has passed, she may still vividly recall these events. I think when the university tries to compensate her, for example, by offering her a guaranteed spot in graduate school, it might not actually provide her with genuine psychological comfort. What we should do more is offer her psychological counseling from the heart to help heal these wounds so she can get through this disaster. Master, what do you think?
This is the very first question, right? You mentioned there were several questions. Yeah, let's answer them one by one, right? This question should be, on one hand, this might not be my issue. It should be an issue for a certain university. But I can also share some of my own views. There was a time when we visited Harvard University in the United States. At that time, there was a female professor who had been teaching and conducting research at Harvard for over 20 years. She also pursued studies in Tibetan Buddhism, and I specifically went to attend her class. When I was attending her class, she was talking about the story of Khandro Yeshe Tsogyal in Tibetan Buddhism. While she was telling the story of Khandro Yeshe Tsogyal, there was a part. She said that in the past, Yeshe Tsogyal had suffered disrespectful acts from others, including rape. But Khandro Yeshe Tsogyal, not only did this not leave her life traumatized or broken in any way, but from that moment onward, her spiritual practice and her life as a whole became even more brilliant and luminous, and her values in life underwent a complete adjustment and transformation. At that time, the professor said, if such incidents happened in the 21st century, in our era, how would we deal with them? Many of the male and female students also actively shared their own opinions at the time, including things they themselves had heard about, and incidents that had happened in schools in various places, and so on. But when I first heard about these kinds of situations, this is what I immediately thought. Whether it happens out there in society at large or within the environment of schools, some of the things that actually occur, in fact, for the individual person, traditionally, habitually, or even from an ethical and moral standpoint, it is also a kind of crisis. But in some cases, this kind of situation may be slightly amplified through the window of the news media, and after being amplified, some reports are positive, while others are negative. So regarding these issues, it may be necessary for every school and every individual to carefully and deliberately study them. And just now I also noticed in your Q&A, your wish to help others psychologically, motivated by genuine intention, is something I really appreciate and rejoice in.
Master, regarding the example you just gave, I think her mindset must be very good. So I believe, shouldn't we, in terms of education, place more emphasis on providing psychological comfort to people facing disasters rather than only offering psychological counseling afterwards? For example, when someone gives a speech for the first time, but if an unexpected situation occurs and makes him feel very embarrassed, it might leave a psychological shadow for him. Afterwards, he may become very afraid of giving speeches. For him, this is also a kind of disaster, one that can be big or small. The reason he develops this mindset might be because he's afraid of making mistakes. Shouldn't our education inspire and encourage students to keep trying, to not be afraid of making mistakes, to learn from those mistakes, and to adjust their mindset accordingly?
I completely agree with this statement. Even now in elementary school, students are still required to, whether it's speaking up or giving speeches, to showcase their talents in many areas. On top of that, they need to bravely face challenges. Because in life, there are constant disasters and pains. In fact, life is a continuous process of dealing with problems. That's how I often see it. So it's very necessary to train ourselves in all aspects for the future. At such times, there is a lot of potential within a person's mind and consciousness. If you are able to unleash the power of your own potential through different methods, then everyone can experience some miraculous abilities, wisdom, and talents that they've never had before. These can also emerge. So it's very necessary to use different approaches to inspire their innate wisdom and skills.
Thank you, Master. The last question, it's about the issue of superstition that a student just mentioned. I think when we talk about superstition, it cannot solve real-life problems. That's why we call it superstition. Humans rely too much on technology. In the future, humanity might destroy itself because of it. Then, another civilization could arise on Earth, but there will still be relics of our current civilization. They might regard our relics as miracles or divine signs. Isn't that a kind of irony? We call today's technology something that, in fact, is not superstition at all. But after some years, when human civilization is destroyed, when the second civilization develops to the level of our technological civilization, will they see what we had back then as superstition? All right, thank you.
There was a leader who was going to talk about the topic of genetically modified agriculture. Actually, this leader didn't even know what genetic modification meant himself. But when he spoke to the public, he said, "You must believe in science, don't be superstitious." He didn't know what genetic modification was or what science really meant, but he kept saying it anyway. So nowadays there are also situations like this in the world. One day it might happen that if we lose all our important traditions and all education of the mind and blindly believe only in external science, we may end up thinking everything we do is just superstition.
Hello, Master. I am currently a psychology teacher at Qingdao University. I also have a question I'd like to ask you. Just now, you helped us resolve our confusion about death. I can understand using impermanence to make sense of death. My current question is somewhat similar to the one raised by the previous student. Especially when humans are faced with man-made disasters, it's actually really quite difficult to truly let go of that kind of resentment, or those kinds of feelings, or that kind of emotional state. So I'd like to ask the Master to help us resolve this confusion as well. How can we help people better face this kind of human-caused disaster, man-made calamities? I also have another question for the Master, and hope you can help us understand it too. How can we help people deal with this kind of lonely mindset? Sometimes I feel a kind of lonely despair. It feels as if I am the only person in this world. Just that kind of feeling. I hope the Master can help us resolve this kind of feeling. Thank you.
In this world, there are many external disasters, earth, water, fire, wind, and so on. But the internal disasters are actually our emotions. The dissatisfaction brought by our friends and family around us is also, in fact, an internal disaster. For example, in our hearts, when we have emotional issues or family problems, whether it's a cold war or a heated argument, this is also a kind of man-made disaster, a kind of calamity. Moreover, the psychological trauma caused by this kind of disaster is often very difficult to heal for a long time, and such situations happen frequently. But I always feel that including the wounds and harm others inflict on us, from the perspective of Mahayana Buddhist teachings, this actually arises from certain causes and conditions. If others treat me badly, it is because I treated them badly in a previous life. In the world, people often say, it's because you owed them in a past life. This well-known saying carries a very profound philosophical meaning. So no matter what happens to us, if you find that you can bear it, we should try our best not to complain about it. If there is something that can be changed, we should always try to change it ourselves. If there really is no way to change it and it has already happened, then it's best for us to adjust our own mindset. If we adjust our mindset, it's actually almost as if the situation has been completely transformed, in fact. That is what really makes a difference. Therefore, what we especially want to convey is that most people don't need to complain about their colleagues, nor about how others treat them. This is also mentioned in the standards for being a good student and child, Dizigui. That resentment should be forgotten as quickly as possible, while kindness should be remembered as much as possible. Among people, if there is a need to repay kindness, then you should always treat it as something very important to yourself. Repay kindness, recognize kindness, and be grateful for kindness. But if someone attacks or harms me in any way, or causes me some kind of trauma or emotional distress, although ordinary people in the world tend to have a certain flaw in their hearts, they just can't forget it and feel uncomfortable whenever they see that person. This kind of situation happens quite often. But in reality, this is an unreasonable mindset. Whenever and wherever an unreasonable mindset arises, we should do our best to change it. At first, trying to change this kind of mindset may be somewhat difficult for us. But in fact, as you gradually study and explore these principles, after a certain period, things won't be the same as before. So our mindset can actually be changed. It's not something that is fixed and unchangeable. For example, in the past, when I saw others treating me badly, I would definitely want to take revenge. That was my mindset. But if I come to realize that this way of thinking is unreasonable, that it doesn't align with worldly principles or religious teachings, I will gradually change. So I think this is a kind of state. But no matter what this state is like, we still need to develop ourselves in a reasonable direction. The second question is about loneliness. Nowadays, there is also a lot of loneliness in this world. On the surface, information is now so highly advanced and sophisticated that you can easily talk to others on the phone, on global platforms such as WeChat, Weibo, QQ, email, and so on. You can connect and communicate with people all over the world. But in reality, people have already become the masters of a single line of communication. Even with your family beside you or your closest friends around you, you basically do not really talk to them at all. Just keep to yourself. Yesterday on the plane, I saw two people. They sat next to me at first and they said, "We have a really, really good relationship." But in reality, after about 10 minutes, right after saying that, they each started posting on their own Weibo and didn't talk at all. At that moment, I thought to myself, people are just like this. Now, relationships between people are becoming more and more indifferent, even with your closest family members. In the end, everyone just does their own thing completely. So naturally, this brings about a kind of loneliness, truly a sense of being alone. This loneliness comes from a sense of spiritual isolation. Actually, people shouldn't feel lonely. With the way we communicate now among our friends, with so many people in our social circles, logically, we shouldn't feel lonely. But when we truly feel lonely deep inside, there's really nothing much we can do about it. However, in Buddhism, the Infinite Life Sutra says, people come and go by themselves, are born and die by themselves. People are truly inherently lonely. In fact, loneliness is simply also a normal phenomenon. When we come into this world, we come alone. And when we leave, we also leave alone. We can't even take our own bodies with us. We depart relying only on our solitary form. So loneliness in this world is also a normal phenomenon. But still, we should have a sense of spiritual fulfillment. If we have faith, we are not lonely. Many people I know, before they had faith, felt that life was very empty and illusory without much meaning. Everything to them only added to their sense of loneliness. But later, when they developed some faith, they started to consider the causes and effects of many issues. For many problems, they found a spiritual support, a sense of reliance and comfort in their lives. So sometimes it really is our lack of faith that leads to a lot of emptiness, confusion, and delusion. But if we have faith, in a certain sense, we definitely have something to rely on. Therefore, in this particular regard, generally speaking, whether we look at some elderly people or some young people, those who have faith basically do not experience this loneliness. Some people even really enjoy solitude, truly appreciating it. For example, some Buddhist elderly people will tell their children not to disturb them. They say, "I want to practice. You don't need to come visit me." Many practitioners are willing to be alone, reciting scriptures, practicing and meditating. So when we face the issue of loneliness, sometimes the power of religion also plays a certain role.
Respected Master, hello, I am currently standing on your left side, just beside you. I am a student from the School of Psychology at Qingdao University, class of 2012. I have a question that has puzzled me for a long time. I would like to ask you about it. As we all know, in the broader context of Chinese society, at least among the people around me, many are somewhat resistant to things like psychology, psychological counseling, and psychological intervention. Yet, many of them pursue more metaphysical things. For example, of course, religion is one aspect. They pursue things that are rather hard to grasp or understand. And they often tend to reject our formal approaches, for example, such as psychological intervention similar to those used abroad. So, may I ask, what is your personal view on this social phenomenon in China? As students in this field who are currently preparing to become future psychological professionals, what specific things should we do in the face of such a social environment in China so that people will accept our psychological work? Thank you, Master.
My thoughts, my perspective, I may have already touched on this a bit earlier in my talk. In the current environment, it's necessary for some people to pursue different goals because relying solely on specialized knowledge or even on university courses to satisfy all the various needs of our minds has its own restrictions and limitations as well as difficulties. So in this situation, some people seek things beyond just professional knowledge. The pursuit of art or the pursuit of religion and faith, these are all very good things. It's just that whether it's art or religion, one shouldn't go astray or veer into any kind of extremism. Some people may not even finish their studies and then get influenced by various behaviors. That would be truly unfortunate. But I also believe that our knowledge is extremely important. From my personal perspective, our specialized knowledge, our university education, if possible, you should even continue on to graduate or doctoral studies. And if there are opportunities in various areas, you can consider going to some Western countries or Southeast Asian countries to learn more about their open educational systems, as well as their diverse ways of thinking and their more relaxed lifestyles. If you have the chance, even more importantly, go to Africa, India, or even Tibet, where some places are relatively underdeveloped, where the teaching conditions and faculty resources are quite poor. Go to these places as well. Then to sum up, it's actually very important, in fact, to consolidate the knowledge you have now. Some college students nowadays, as a matter of fact, think that since they've graduated from university, they can be quite arrogant, like, I graduated with a bachelor's degree from such and such university. But in reality, our knowledge is still quite limited. We should learn more about the good aspects and more advanced scientific and technological knowledge, and also about the more basic things, including some poorer and more underdeveloped areas. Sometimes as a person you need to go out, see things for yourself, and experience them firsthand. In this way, you'll naturally gain a great deal of valuable knowledge and also many important life philosophies. These will come to you naturally over time. I think that if we only rely on expertise in just a single field, that's not really enough either. Because in China nowadays, there are a lot of people who understand specialized knowledge. But when it comes to actually working in society and putting it into practice, the occasions when we really use our specialized knowledge are very, very few. This is quite different from many places in Western countries. For example, in some Western countries, people will definitely use their specialized knowledge throughout their entire lives. But here, Someone who studied at a teacher's college might end up becoming an architect, while someone who originally studied architecture might become a teacher. Chaotic situations like this can happen, so we need to prepare ourselves in our field of expertise, but also aim higher and learn more. Sometimes it's important not to get too absorbed in just one thing, but it's also necessary to understand some religious doctrines related to the mind and spirit. Why is it that everyone likes to study the Diamond Sutra? Why does everyone especially love to recite the Heart Sutra? The Heart Sutra is only about 150 characters long, right? Why have so many people recited it since ancient times, even though it's so short? What is its meaning and what secrets does it hold? For college students, it is important to note that your thinking may only reach a certain level of maturity. Plus, during your university years, you might have a teacher who is rather conservative. Aside from their professional expertise, nowadays there are some teachers like this. It might sound somewhat harsh to say, but they've basically become complete bookworms. They have a wealth of professional knowledge, but reject everything outside of that. As a result, when students leave this environment, they're not very open-minded. Therefore, I think we must study our major very seriously, as best as we can. But aside from our major, we shouldn't reject other things either. We should consider whether it's necessary to learn about them. If, during the process of personally learning and understanding, you find something unreasonable, then you have the right to treat it as mere superstition or to simply reject it. Either is perfectly fine. But if you haven't personally tried it yourself and each of us just leaves it aside, you shouldn't praise it, nor should you slander it, because in reality, you don't truly understand it. Only when you truly understand it do you have the right to judge it.
Hello, Master. I am a student from the School of Mechanical and Electrical Engineering. Buddhism talks about cause and effect. Good causes lead to good results, bad causes lead to bad results. Regarding this concept of cause and effect, there is a question that has been troubling me. I'd like to ask you about it. For example, at a certain point in time, I did something bad, something I really should not have done. Then, at a subsequent point in time, after that particular moment, I recently experienced something quite unpleasant and bad. Would these two events be considered a bad cause and a bad effect? Thank you, Master.
Some of the subtleties of cause and effect are, in fact, incredibly profound and truly complex. So, for someone like me, not to mention even beginning to understand the causes and effects in your mind, I honestly don't even actually know the causes and effects of what I've done in my own life throughout all these years. But still, when I try to deduce it through careful reasoning, it's very possible that the bad things you did in this life eventually ripened into consequences. It could also be from your previous life, or perhaps from the life before your last one, or even from lives that took place much earlier in your soul's journey. In any case, certain bad deeds and certain good deeds that we have done are like seeds that are being planted right now in this very moment. Some of these seeds, some flowers bloom in spring, while some flowers bloom in winter, and some only bloom after many years have passed, sometimes in ways we do not expect. So, all the good and bad deeds we carry out, it's like planting a seed, and these seeds bloom at different times. So I believe that good deeds will be rewarded and bad deeds will be punished. But whether these rewards or punishments happen in this life or the next truly depends on the specific conditions and causes present in each person's heart. So, exactly what kind of deed you choose to do and what kind of result it brings, even for me, that remains an unknown. But I truly believe that the suffering or pain you are currently experiencing or going through at this moment must be the result of actions you did in a previous life or perhaps even earlier in this life. This point is also very important for everyone here. When we don't understand this principle, many problems do seem confusing to us. The law of cause and effect truly cannot be escaped, so everyone must be cautious. Good deeds bring good results and bad deeds bring bad results. Nowadays, many people think that good deeds bring good results and bad deeds bring bad results. It's just a law of cause and effect limited to this lifetime. But actually, that's not reasonable either. It should also be related to past and future lives to some extent in some ways. Therefore, I also sincerely hope that the teachers and students present here will realize that while it's easy to say good deeds bring good results and bad deeds bring bad results, but to truly believe in it, and not only believe, but also in your future actions, do your best to perform good deeds because they bring good results. And when it comes to bad deeds, do your best to control your body and mind. regardless of whether others say anything or not. If you can make such a firm and resolute decision in your own actions, that is truly an excellent and admirable way to behave. In Buddhism, the foundation of all spiritual practice is to place great importance on the careful acceptance and rejection of cause and effect.
Respected Khenpo, hello. I am a student from the 2013 class of the School of Psychology. Just now in your lecture, you mentioned that when people are faced with disasters, the first thing to do is to help them calm down. Then, by using some methods from Buddhism and Zen to regulate the mind, people can face the life ahead with composure and a sense of calm. So my first question is, what are the methods for regulating the mind in Buddhism? Because as students of the School of Psychology, we have also learned some methods of psychological counseling. So regarding methods for regulating the mind in Buddhism, how are they different from the counseling methods in psychology? My second question is, as a psychology student, if we currently wish to combine Buddhist teachings with the knowledge of psychology as an academic discipline, what specific books or resources should we read? My third question is, since entering the School of Psychology at Qingdao University, after learning some knowledge of psychology, I feel that it is very necessary to introduce psychological knowledge into current education in China. It is truly essential. As a student at a teacher's college, I have imagined before that if I happen to one day stand in the position of a teacher, I would carefully develop a step-by-step teaching plan to provide my students with some methods for regulating their minds. After listening to your lecture just now, you mentioned that you believe introducing methods from Buddhism for regulating the mind into today's universities is also very necessary. If we were to introduce Buddhist teachings into current secondary education, how should we arrange our teaching plans? Should it also, like psychological knowledge, require a step-by-step arrangement? Thank you, Master.
The first question, in fact, Buddhism also has many methods for regulating the mind. For example, whether in daily life or in spiritual practice, whenever we encounter anything, we need to calm our minds. To achieve this calmness, meditation practice is very important because meditation practice, as I mentioned earlier, many people have restless and scattered minds. When your mind is scattered, you can't succeed at anything you do. Therefore, in Buddhism, when it comes to adjusting the mind, there is something called right knowledge and right mindfulness. There are also practices called calm abiding, special insight, and the 9 stages of abiding the mind. If we practice these methods of adjustment with steady and mindful effort, then, in the end, the mind gradually attains what is called pliancy. So, what is mental pliancy? It means that if you wish to focus on an object, your mind can naturally and effortlessly concentrate on that object. If you don't want to focus on the object, your mind can freely generate thoughts and intentions. When one reaches a certain level in calm, abiding practice, the mind becomes completely pliant, which is also called lightness or suppleness. This method of cultivating lightness, as you mentioned in your second question just now regarding which books cover this topic, in fact, it is discussed in the Yoga Karabhumi Shastra, as well as in the text we often refer to and study, the Bodhikaryavattara, the way of the Bodhisattva. Especially in the 8th chapter of the Bodhikaryavattara. There is a great deal regarding psychology in these texts, and there is also a text called the Mahayana Abhidharma Shastra. In the Mahayana Abhidharma Shastra, Buddhist psychology particularly identifies a total of 51 mental factors. It explains in detail how to distinguish and differentiate them. In Tibetan Buddhism, there is also a text called Gateway to Knowledge, among others. In my opinion, I think these books are very much definitely worth studying. Of course, some of them are available in Chinese, while some may not yet have been translated into Chinese. There is also a text, notably called the Compendium of Training, which is also available in Chinese. Only after studying these will you realize that in Buddhism, Psychology has already systematically categorized many different types of mind, and for each type of mind, it is described which are wholesome and which are unwholesome, and which wholesome minds correspond with which other mental states. As I mentioned earlier, I myself have always been very interested in psychology, but at that time in the secular world, such as notably metaphysics, Freud, and many others, including Jung's psychology. For example, I went to read about them a bit more, and after reading about them, I became especially interested when I saw the Mahayana Buddhist perspective on psychology. Therefore, I was particularly eager to study these books. It should be said that university psychology and Buddhist psychology, of course, both require long-term study. We are also very interested in the possibility that in the future, universities and Buddhist academy can build some bridges for the mind in terms of spirituality. For example, we can offer some Buddhist perspectives on mental attitudes. In the West, many religious figures and university professors jointly organize dialogues on psychological science every year. Just a day or two ago at Tsinghua University, there was a Professor Liu Bing, and we also held an event together. He approached it from a scientific perspective, while we approached it from a Buddhist perspective. So it is very necessary for science and Buddhism to have some dialogues now and in the future. During the process of dialogue, we Buddhists can provide valuable knowledge and insights from the perspective of Buddhism. After all, when compared to you professional scientists, we Buddhists are still quite far apart from you in terms of scientific expertise and understanding. Therefore, you should provide some solid scientific evidence and reliable foundations. For us, this is also a very good supplement. So in the future, I think it is very necessary for us to openly communicate and study these aspects of mental attitudes with each other. And then, regarding your third question just now about the current science of cognitive psychology at this time, actually in Buddhism as well. I'm not saying this just because I'm a Buddhist. Actually, I have also read some resources and writings from other religions and some scientific works. At this point, Buddhism relies entirely on logic, reasoning, and debate. This allows for complete discernment. So in front of today's intellectuals, there is a wealth of evidence and well-reasoned arguments that can completely substantiate it. Therefore, Buddhist education like this, if we want to promote it on our educational platforms in the future, on the one hand, it can be introduced gradually, step by step, just like your psychology courses, progressing gradually and carefully, one step at a time. But on the other hand, we may also need to consider that although traditional texts like Standards for Being a Good Student and Child and 1,000-Character Classic, these are simple courses, but for university teachers and students, using this kind of humanistic knowledge as the foundation and main thread, this includes Buddhist texts like the Sigalovada Sutta and the Sutra on Karma and its Results, which when first heard may sound mysterious and profound. Some university students nowadays might wonder, what is the significance of this? This also includes other religious texts, such as the Tao Te Ching. When you first look at them, you might wonder, what are they really talking about? But in fact, these texts also discuss the profound and fundamental laws of the universe, as well as the unity of heaven and humanity. If we can understand these laws, they can greatly benefit science and our education as well. So I also sincerely hope that each of us, especially those who want to help influence the next generation, the people of the next generation, we don't want them to be just people who simply know a bit of technology and just a little bit of knowledge. Because some problems in life are difficult to solve relying solely on technology or knowledge. There are certainly some specific challenges to that. If you have a strong foundation and a solid background in the humanities, and you combine that with the technical knowledge and skills that are taught in schools today, then it becomes truly well-rounded. If you rely only on traditional education and the humanities, but if you lack the wings of modern knowledge, you will not be able to soar into the heights of the 21st century. So I think we probably need to actively cultivate knowledge in many different and diverse areas. Only then can we achieve a more well-rounded result.
Hello, Master. I am a student from the 2013 class of the School of Psychology. My question is, as you just mentioned, if college students at school have not received this kind of spiritual education, after graduation they may not be able to cope with various setbacks. In fact, this is a phenomenon that none of us want to see or experience. And you also mentioned that in countries like the United States and Germany, related courses have already been introduced. So in China, where we currently don't yet have these objective conditions, what specific measures do you think we, as college students ourselves, should take, and what should we do to contribute to improving this situation? Thank you.
Actually, in the education of various universities now, there are already some, basically, for example, at Fudan University, as well as Tsinghua, Peking University, Zhejiang University, and so on. There are many courses that combine meditation with psychological cognition. Looking at the objective situation from various aspects in the future, I think many universities will also have some courses in this area. In the United States and other countries, some schools actually do not allow certain beliefs and religions. However, courses related to spirituality are included in many schools. Therefore, I think that different schools truly have their own unique and distinctive characteristics. I don't really think that this is the most important thing right now. The key is that college students themselves should have an open mindset and not be too conservative. Apart from the knowledge learned in university, all these other things, if you label them as superstition or use some particularly extreme terms to judge them, I don't think that's very reasonable. At the same time, we ourselves, as I just mentioned, actually during university, we have a lot of time. At this time, we should read some relevant and insightful books. While in university, one should read 10,000 books. After graduation, one should travel 10,000 miles. I think this way is more ideal. Otherwise, if we only understand our own specialized knowledge or just a few courses, not only is this the case in your universities, but also in our Buddhist academy. Our Buddhist academy also has related specialized courses, logic, madhyamaka, vinaya, which are also similar to university courses. But some monks, not only do they complete all their classes in the academy, but also, beyond that, they continuously study knowledge that benefits their own life and their future work in spreading the Dharma and benefiting others. They keep learning knowledge that is beneficial to them. So I think that as university students, in addition to completing your own coursework and assignments, you should also learn more, including subjects such as religious studies, anthropology, history, and cultural studies. And within our ancient culture, especially the basic teachings of Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, what exactly are their most fundamental doctrines? I think many young people today should take a look at these. In fact, for more than 2,500 years, these have been passed down to the present day. And there are still so many people who sincerely believe in religion and worship it. Actually, it's not necessarily all just superstition. Some people might think that everyone involved is simply just a group of ignorant or uninformed people. But in reality, the true power of faith and the important teachings of religion are actually very beneficial and advantageous to human genes and also to the human mind. It's precisely because they are beneficial and play a role in our lives. Our minds also have a kind of karmic connection with certain knowledge from past lives. If we don't understand these principles, we may encounter many moments of confusion in life. The path of life is not something that can be solved with just one kind of knowledge. Moreover, this path of life requires a kind of emotion. It requires a kind of mysterious, almost enigmatic knowledge. Many of the keys are actually in our own hands. Some of the keys are in the hands of teachers, and some are in books. So I think if we only rely on the keys to knowledge that a teacher provides, including those from ourselves and from books, and we don't pay attention to these external keys, then when you encounter situations in life that go beyond the knowledge your teacher has taught you, you won't be able to solve them on your own. So we need to be aware of the fact that we will face many different things in life, and there are various different ways to solve them.
Hello, Master. I am a student 2013 class, the School of Psychology. I would like to ask this question. After the Wenchuan earthquake, we saw the country gave significant aid to Wenchuan and carried out major reconstruction efforts. We noticed that after experiencing a disaster, the entire region becomes completely renewed and drastically different. So, does this accelerated process of urbanization have any psychological impact on them? What kind of impact does it have? And when we provide psychological assistance to those in need, what should we focus on in particular? Thank you.
On one hand, it may have some psychological impact on them. But as for this kind of impact, as we all know, the loss of loved ones, generally speaking, cannot be replaced or compared with any material possessions, property, or houses. So, to some extent, even though they have a new home, if they have truly lost their spiritual support or their dearest ones, they will always remain in a state of being wounded. That's just how people are. No matter where disasters happen at first, we can only provide material assistance. But I truly believe that if we can provide genuine spiritual support, that is the most enduring help. Therefore, spiritual education is extremely important. In such situations, for teachers and students at school, sometimes what matters even more is learning how to provide support for the soul. If someone receives this kind of support and is able to untangle the knots in their heart, if they have truly figured something out, then from that moment on they experience a kind of rebirth. Nowadays there are many various syndromes in the world, including but not limited to depression and autism, among others. For example, the psychological after effects of the Wenchuan earthquake and many similar events. On the surface, it may initially seem like the houses have been completely renewed and transformed. But in reality, however, people's hearts and inner feelings may not be any happier or more fulfilled. Therefore, in some respects, we might explain to them the principle of impermanence in life. In Buddhism, it is often said that everything in life is impermanent, and this is one of the most important teachings. Nowadays, I often talk to people about the impermanence of worldly affairs. When impermanence is mentioned, people might think to themselves, that's true. In the past, sometimes there were no houses, but people were there. Now there are houses, but the people are gone. This is a form of impermanence. After some time, many things will also happen to us personally. In life, we are all performing different acts in the play of impermanence. Therefore, both in our own lives and in the environment around us, we can find many examples of impermanence.
Hello, Khenpo. I am a student from the School of Psychology, class of 2013. In today's modern society, there is a term that is often referred to as positive energy. Contemporary society tends to focus on the more positive aspects. From a psychological perspective, what is currently popular is humanism and positive psychology. But Buddhism strongly advocates asceticism, which means restraining one's desires in our lives. So from this perspective, what significance does Buddhism have for our contemporary society?
Actually, Buddhism does not require everyone to practice asceticism. In general, there is no such requirement. As our material society continues to develop and progress, bringing with it improvements in technology and daily life, from the Buddhist point of view, this advancement is considered something admirable and positive. However, according to certain Buddhist teachings, in order to restrain excessive greed and desires, there are also some individual practices that are ascetic. It's quite similar in education nowadays. Some parents' educational methods, such as not allowing their children to buy luxury goods or expensive clothes, and insisting that they study diligently and endure hardship. Because if you don't study hard and endure hardship, you won't achieve much in the end. Therefore, in Buddhist texts such as the Vinaya Sutra and some individual Theravada scriptures, it is stated that in order to restrain our significant greed, some practices are simply about being content with little and living frugally. There is such a teaching. However, when Buddhism reached the Mahayana stage, which emphasizes altruistic action, even if you possess a great deal of gold and silver treasures, it is still permitted. So we cannot sum up Buddhist teachings in a single sentence. Psychological knowledge also has different methods of explanation at different levels. Nowadays, many people think that Buddhism is all about asceticism, that everyone must be ascetic. They believe Buddhist monks must stay in the mountains. If they come out into the city, they should be punished. But if we put it that way, it probably doesn't work, because there are some cases where, for example, some Buddhist monastics go into retreat in the mountains. But in different scriptures, it is also emphasized that one should come out into the city and teach to meet sentient beings' needs, adapting as needed. Some doctrines mention ascetic practices like Dhutanga, which are also present. But in some other teachings and in the Buddhist precepts, it is said that you can live in houses adorned with gold and silver, and you can enjoy these things, but you should not be attached to them, and you should have a mind focused on benefiting others. So different scriptures record things differently. Different principles, in other words, bring to light and highlight different content. Therefore, Buddhism is also incredibly varied and rich in content. It's not that a single sentence or a certain meaning represents everything. This isn't the only issue. There are many other questions as well. Now, regarding the questions many people have, what a lot of people say is, doesn't Buddhism say that form is emptiness and emptiness is form? Buddhism teaches seeing through things. Why eat? You haven't seen through. Doesn't Buddhism talk about emptiness? You haven't reached emptiness yet. You still have the attachment to wanting to practice. So we can't. It's the same with psychology too. A single word truly can't represent all the content of psychology. A single word can't represent all education. Why does Buddhism teach seeing through things? There is specific content to seeing through. Why mention asceticism? Specific content about asceticism exists, but many situations do not require it.
Respected Khenpo, hello. On such a truly wonderful day, I am very pleased and honored to see you. I am quite interested in Buddhism, and I am also one of your devoted fans. I think that high monks and great masters like you have made many important contributions to the propagation of Buddhism. However, in our everyday society, we also need more bodhisattvas among officials and business people, including bodhisattvas who are deans and all the student bodhisattvas as well. Do our own work well and then help more people. However, in our lives, there are indeed some confusions. For example, killing or telling some lies. Sometimes in certain situations, you just have to do it, or you simply can't change the situation. I would like to ask you to give us some guidance. How we should face these situations, or how we can do our own work better. Make good use of this opportunity and provide more meaningful service to others. Thank you.
You just mentioned so many bodhisattvas. It seems that everyone here is a bodhisattva. If everyone is a bodhisattva, then bodhisattvas wouldn't kill living beings? Just kidding. This mainly refers to the fact that in our present daily lives, after all, many of you here still live according to our habits and traditions, following the usual patterns of life. At such times, sometimes it's voluntary, sometimes it's forced upon us. In these circumstances, we might, in many cases, inevitably create some negative karma. This is hard to avoid, but try your best not to harm sentient beings. In fact, killing sentient beings brings notably grave and extremely serious consequences in Buddhism. Many people might think that as long as you don't kill humans, it's fine. But killing other animals, especially in coastal cities like this one, where eating seafood every day is considered completely normal for many people, seems as natural as eating grass without any particular feeling about it. But this too, for you all, from the perspective of us Buddhists, is actually a very frightening thing, because no matter what kind of sentient being it is, life is extremely precious. If you believe in this, it's very possible that today I am eating this sentient being, but in the future I might also become exactly the same kind of sentient being in this world and ultimately be eaten by it. This repetitive cycle of karmic retribution is also truly terrifying. Therefore, we should do our best to protect the lives of other animals, just as we protect human life. If in some situations you really can't avoid it, at least don't order the killing. This is also very important. Otherwise, the negative karma people are creating nowadays is also extremely serious. There are many Buddhists who, when they start studying Buddhism, have spent half their lives like butchers, killing countless sentient beings, and even wanting to repent is very difficult. Of course, if you actually have no faith at all, that's also really your personal choice in life. You might not necessarily find this reasonable, and certainly in these areas, there may be some differences in our perspectives on life. Therefore, what kind of perspective you choose also depends on your own attitude.
Because of time constraints, I'm sorry, but we'll have to end the Q&A here. This afternoon, I feel that this lecture has been a dialogue between Buddhism and psychology. It truly is, in the course of this dialogue, that within Buddhist thought, we see traces of psychology, and within psychological thought, we see traces of Buddhism. It's a truly wonderful feeling, really. Let me just actually mention something off the cuff. For example, the teacher brought up the impermanence of life. I think that in psychology, when we try to enhance our ability to endure and accept everything, whether it's disasters or the ups and downs of life, this is a very, very good explanation or reason indeed. So in psychology, we also say that we should live in the here and now and cherish life. The teacher mentioned that the mind can be vast or small, and that we should face things with ease. In psychology, it is also mentioned that we are encouraged to consistently cultivate strong mental energy. The teacher mentioned that we should strive to become wise individuals, to combine tradition with modernity and material with the spiritual. This immediately reminded me of what we've always emphasized, that we should become integrated individuals in many, many ways. I also need to go back and slowly reflect on my experiences to gradually learn and improve myself. In this ongoing dialogue between Buddhism and psychology, this harmonious resonance, I believe, is something meaningful that I want to share with everyone present here. Our own personal growth, as well as the ways in which we can serve and support others, are all deeply connected. Especially for us as psychology professionals, how we can improve our psychological service capabilities has provided us with tremendous support. So I propose, let us once again express our gratitude to the teacher's speech with a warm round of applause. All right, next, let's now please invite Dean Tao to the stage. The teacher has worked very hard this afternoon, and we would like to express a small token of our appreciation. There is a photo album of our work in Sichuan, and we invite Dean Tao to present it to our teacher. Let us respectfully see the teacher first.